What if the band that laid the blueprint for one of the biggest rock movements of the 90s was a group that most people have never even heard of? What if some of the most famous musicians in the world, the guys from Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam, claimed this band and I quote, invented the grunge genre? This is the story of a band with a sound so revolutionary, it should have made them global superstars, but it didn't. So how does a band like this become rock's greatest, best-kept secret? This is the wild and kind of frustrating story of King's X from the time they formed up until the days they were on a major label. By the way, guys, I've had so many requests for this band. Let me know if you want me to cover their entire history down below in the comment section, because that'll probably end up being an hour-long video. To get King's X, you have to go back to the very beginning. The band's story doesn't start under the bright lights of LA or even New York. It starts in Springfield, Missouri. Bassist and vocalist Doug Pinnick, guitarist Ty Tabor, and drummer Jerry Gaskill first crossed paths around 1979, and by 1980 they'd officially formed a band. Tabor and Gaskill were the first to meet at Evangel College, a Christian university in Springfield. Tabor recalled, "The very first time I met Jerry, I was actually playing drums in a band that opened for his group. I had to ask him if we could use his drums." Tabor was playing guitar since he was a kid. His dad played a lot of country and bluegrass around him, and they soon met Pinnick at the same school. The trio took their musical cues from Sly Stone, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix, Robin Trower, and even Rush, to name a few. Tabor told the Chicago Tribune, "We grew up in completely different environments and cultures. It took us years to learn how to communicate." For almost half a decade, they were a band without a name that would stick. First, they tried out The Edge in the spring of 1980, and they later renamed themselves Sneak Preview. They were a working band in the truest sense of the word, grinding it out in the bar circuit, sometimes playing 5 sets a night to crowds that were barely there. They were paying their dues, honing their craft, and developing this almost telepathic chemistry. In the early days as The Edge, at the insistence of their then manager, they played covers by Big Country, U2, The Police, Bryan Adams, and the Beatles, much to their chagrin. But the members admitted they hated to conform, so the covers they did play were quite different from the originals. After a while, they reverted back to playing originals, with Gaskill telling the Corpus Christi Caller-Times, "We went into a really packed club and played our own music. By the end of the first set, there were 2 or 3 tables left." But by the end of the 80s, this trio became hailed as one of the most innovative rock bands in America, with Vernon Reid of Living Colour and Billy Squier heaping praise on them while also touring alongside them. So how did they get there? By 1985, after building a following in Springfield, they moved to Houston, Texas. The members claimed they dropped out of the Christian university because of hypocrisy there, and because they didn't want to play to already converted people, as they told the Sun News. They soon moved to Houston with the promise of a record and management deal, with Pinnick admitting to the Springfield News Leader, "We had a financial backer who wanted us to back a solo singer. We backed him for a year, but it didn't work out." That company was Star Song Records, and the trio soon toured with Christian singer Morgan Cryer. And while on the road, they started developing their own material, calling themselves King's X. The name had no special meaning to the members. Their manager, who had played in a band called King's X in Dallas back in the 60s, was the one who suggested it. Through Star Song Records, the band was soon introduced to a guy named Sam Taylor, who was responsible for producing some of ZZ Top's biggest hits. Taylor, unlike those before him, encouraged King's X to be true to themselves instead of focusing on making money and making hits. Taylor, who's sometimes labeled as the 4th member of the band, remarked how King's X early backers were trying to shape the band into a more commercially viable act, remarking, "When I first met these guys, Doug, who is one of the greatest singers I've ever heard, was sort of imitating Bono. Here's a guy with this great voice who reminded me of things I grew up listening to, and they're trying to make him into U2 or something." Taylor worked with the band on honing their sound. Tabor told Kerrang, "Sam helped us lose all the pretentious mannerisms and sloppy habits we'd picked up after years of being a bar band." King's X early sound was powerful but unfocused, pulling in from the big anthemic rock bands of the era like U2. But something was missing, the magic ingredient, the thing that would make them, well, them. This hadn't quite clicked into place yet. That moment finally came when Ty Tabor started experimenting. He began detuning his guitar, a technique with roots in bluegrass that he grew up on, and applied it to heavy rock. And suddenly, all the pieces locked in together. You had Tabor's detuned, heavy yet clear guitar, Pinnick's thundering complex bass lines, and Gaskell's solid groovy foundation. On top of all of that, they layered these complex Beatles-style three-part harmonies, and it was a sound that just didn't exist anywhere else. It was heavy, soulful, progressive, and funky all at the same time. It was by 1987 the band played a showcase in New York City at the Cat Club for Megaforce Records, who was distributed through Atlantic at the time. It was a friend of Pinnick's who knew someone at Megaforce who got the trio's tapes to the label. Megaforce signed the band to a 5 or 6 album deal depending on what you read. It was in 1988 King's X dropped their debut album Out of the Silent Planet. In a music scene totally dominated by hair metal and glossy pop, their record was a complete anomaly. It was raw, yet spiritual and musically dense. It didn't sound like anything on radio or MTV. Rolling Stone magazine hailed the record as an, I quote, critically applauded blend of muscular progressive metal, Beatles-esque vocals, and AOR melodic savvy. It was hailed as one of the most original releases of the year by the rock press, with Pinnick summing up the record stating, "I guess it's about hope and truth. All this love and peace and the world's going to be different someday like they said in the 60s. That's not realistic. It's an individual seeking things out. It's survival with compassion." As part of the tour to support this record, they toured with Anthrax and Overkill. It was in 1988 that the band was featured on the cover of the February 20th issue of Kerrang! Magazine, with the publication calling their first album an awesome debut. 10 damn near perfect tracks. A debut as forceful in character, as dazzling in its range of vision and command of complex musical landscapes, to rank alongside such classic debuts as the first U2 album, Metallica's first album, with them adding it was one of the most original debuts of the year. Soon enough, King's X were being hailed as the future of rock music. Tabor told the Clarion Ledger, "We were easily shoved through the door in England. They're more artistically inclined than commercially inclined. Your record doesn't have to appear in the top 10 to be on the cover of a magazine." The band's sound was hard to nail down, a combination of hard rock, metal, and progressive rock, with the group's lyrics having a religious undertone. The members talked about feeling like they were outsiders, comparing themselves to being musical orphans. While the members did state they were Christian, they didn't operate in the same Christian rock space as groups like Stryper. As they put it, the band's songs are about reflecting on the world they were living in, with Pinnick remarking at the time, "When I write lyrics, it's just me searching, asking questions, such as what is right, what is wrong, what is Christian, and what isn't evil." The band returned in 1989 with Gretchen Goes to Nebraska, a concept album based on a short story that was written by their drummer Gaskell. It's a story of a young girl's trip to Oklahoma, and it was said to be a nod to both Alice in Wonderland and The Wizard of Oz. Gretchen discovers that what she truly seeks is inside her all along. Take what you learn, set it free. The title was something the band had come up with from their sound man. The album ended up selling around 80 to 90,000 copies. It was by 1990 King's X issued their third record, Faith, Hope, Love, a title that was taken from the New Testament, and the topic of religion, as you can imagine, came up again and again in interviews. Gaskell told the Springfield News Leader, "You have to understand that the term Christian carries with it all these preconceived ideas with it in people's heads. I don't want to put myself in any of these categories." It's Love became the band's biggest hit to date, peaking at number 6 on the mainstream rock tracks chart, garnering a good amount of play on MTV, and over 100 radio stations in America were playing the group. The album, meanwhile, peaked at number 85 in the States and number 70 in the UK. Faith, Hope, and Love ended up outselling Gretchen Goes to Nebraska in its first 6 weeks of release. The band got the opportunity of a lifetime while promoting the record to open for AC/DC because both Angus and Malcolm Young were huge fans of the band and offered them the opening spot. The success of Faith, Hope, Love resulted in Atlantic Records signing the band directly, taking them away from Megaforce Records. The result was a more accessible album set to combine the sound of U2 with early Rush. By 1992, King's X issued their fourth album, which was self-titled. By this point, the volume of interviews bringing up religion resulted in the band simply referring to the matter as the C word. Tabor remarked at the time, "Personally, we do not label ourselves, we do not join up with any organized effort." And this misconception, the band claimed, may have actually halted their momentum and hurt their sales. So this is where the mystery really starts, because while all the other bands were listening, the larger public just, well, wasn't. What was going on? Well, one of the biggest problems was the Christian rock label. Their lyrics were deeply spiritual, sure, but they never wanted to be part of that industry. The band knew if they accepted that label, they'd lose the freedom to simply be themselves, so they rejected it. But the label seemed to stick anyway, leaving them in this weird limbo where they were seen as too religious for mainstream rock, but too secular for the Christian market. It got to a point where they were basically exiled from Christian bookstores, a move the band, ironically celebrated as a kind of freedom. Others claimed the band's lyrics were too hard to decipher, something that both Gaskill and the rest of the band actually appreciated, with him telling the Corpus Christi Caller, "That's good because I guess we're not sure of the meaning either. Sometimes being vague is much more clear and accurate than saying this or that." Pinnock, however, had another theory as to why the band struggled for mainstream success, pointing to racism. He told Louder Sound, "Black singers in a rock band doesn't do well because white dudes want to hear a white guy singing about how they're doing. I just don't think they related to me. In America, we still have that racial thing going on. Oh, I like the band, but the singer's black." Then there was their image, or really the industry's total inability to market it. How do you sell a band that sounds like Sly Stone, the Beatles, and Black Sabbath all at the same time? How do you market a hard rock power trio fronted by a tall black man with a mohawk in an era where rock was overwhelmingly white? Doug Pinnick's very presence challenged the segregated norms of the whole genre. He was an amazing frontman, but he didn't fit into this neat little box that the industry needed for mass consumption. And so despite all the critical acclaim and the love from fellow artists, mainstream superstardom just stayed out of reach for the group. While King's X was struggling to find a mass audience, a revolution was brewing in the Pacific Northwest. Bands like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, Pearl Jam, and Nirvana were cooking up a new sound, heavy, sludgy, and emotionally raw. It would become known as the so-called grunge movement, and it sounded a whole lot like King's X. And that connection was no accident. A huge part of it was the drop tuning that Ty Tabor had actually been using for their early albums. Now, he wasn't the first person to ever do this, but his unique way of applying it to heavy rock created this massive, sludgy, super resonant tone. It was the absolute cornerstone of King's X sound, and well, it became a fundamental part of the grunge sound as well. The Seattle musicians weren't shy about giving credit where it was due. In the early 90s, at the peak of Pearl Jam's fame, bassist Jeff Ament went on MTV and just said it outright. King's X invented grunge. For Pinnock, having someone say that publicly meant the world, especially when so many other musicians who felt the same way kept quiet about it. But the influence wasn't just the tuning, it was the blend of heavy riffs with melodic, complex harmonies, a combo that Alice in Chains in particular would totally make their own. While King's X never became a household name, their musical DNA is woven right into the fabric of every one of the last great rock movements. They were the architects of a sound that would go on to define a generation. When the band stopped in Seattle in 1988, the members of Soundgarden, Mother Love Bone, and Alice in Chains saw that concert. In the case of Alice in Chains, Gaskill recalled being chased down the street by frontman Lane Staley, with Gaskill telling Louder Sound, "I see this guy hurling down the street towards me going, 'Jerry, Jerry, I love your band, man.' It was Lane. For some reason, they were all really supportive of us up there. We became friends with a lot of those guys." As the 90s rolled on, King's X kept evolving. Their 1992 self-titled album saw them lean into a heavier, darker sound, reflecting the changing tides of rock. It wasn't long after they finally went their separate ways with their early backer, manager, and producer Sam Taylor. Pinnock told Louder Sound, "He just quit. He had such control on us that when he left, we had nothing. No contacts, no money, no way to even know what we were going to do. We were just like orphans on the street." But it was their 1994 album Dogman that really felt like a whole new chapter for the group. They worked with famed producer Brendan O'Brien, whose credits around this time included Pearl Jam and Stone Temple Pilots, and they stripped down their sound to the rawest core. The result was this gritty, grunge-infused monster of an album. It was so heavy and aggressive, a total fan favorite, and an artistic win that proved that the band was still miles ahead of the curve. Tabor told the Houston Chronicle, "I wanted to play things more straight ahead and rocking. A lot of that was inspired by Metallica, who was able to make a direct album without losing any integrity, and an album that was immediate and accessible on the first listen." Tabor added in a separate interview to Louder Sound, "Brendan," referring to Brendan O'Brien, "got the best out of us. Before, there was always a kind of dark energy in the studio, a pressure that we all just wanted to be out from under. With Dogman, we felt freedom. They got the chance to open for Motley Crue, who was being fronted by John Corabi at the time, and they even got the chance to play a huge set at Woodstock 94. Despite these opportunities, that massive commercial breakthrough that they deserved just never came. So that led to their sixth and final album for Atlantic Records, 1996's Ear Candy. And you can really feel the pressure on this record. Like this was their last shot with a major label. The album shifted gears again. The raw heaviness of Dogman was dialed back for more melodic, straightforward songs, with their guitarist Tabor even went back to singing lead on a few tracks. Ear Candy is a fascinating, almost sad record. It's the reworkings of super old songs from their pre-King's X days, like Picture and Mississippi Moon, which shows the band looking backward as they were trying to move forward. The album charted, but it wasn't the smash hit the label wanted. It marked the end of their time with Atlantic Records, closing the book on their brush with the mainstream. At the end of the day, the story of King's X isn't so much a tragedy, it's a testament to artistic integrity and the insane bond between three musicians. For over 40 years, Doug Pinnick, Ty Tabor, and Jerry Gaskill have stayed together, which is almost unheard of in the music world. Through all the label drama, the changing trends, and the constant frustration of being overlooked, their commitment to their music never, ever waned. They are the ultimate musician's musician. Their real impact isn't on the Billboard charts. It's baked into the DNA of countless bands they inspire. They changed the landscape of rock music, period. As Jerry Gaskill once put it, nothing's changed for us except for the evolution of us being ourselves. King's X may be the greatest band you've never heard of, but their legacy is loud and clear for anyone who takes the time to listen. That brings us to the end of today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. If you like discovering stories like this, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you have suggestions for other influential but overlooked bands that I should cover, let me know in the comments as well, and we'll see you again on Rock and Roll True Stories, guys. Take care.